All right, everyone, welcome to this next example in the flow log observability and troubleshooting series. And this example, we're going to look at how to identify flows denied or being denied by a particular policy. Okay. So for example, there are instances where you have implemented, let's say, a deny list policy or a threat feed policy, and it's possible that certain flows at certain times match these policies, and maybe you're interested in retrieving a report to identify the type of flows that match these policies, okay, for analysis purposes. It could also be the case where, let's say, you've implemented a namespace isolation policy or a workload isolation policy, and maybe these workloads were trying to communicate to certain destinations or maybe receive flows from certain other sources that could get denied by a policy if you did not have the rules to permit those destinations or sources, for example. And sometimes these denies are legitimate, right? Maybe you didn't want a workload to communicate with a particular destination, or you didn't want a certain source to receive or send traffic rather to a particular workload. So it could be legitimate as well, but it could also be the case where you hadn't necessarily factored in the policy, or it could be a new requirement, right? And you may be interested in looking at a particular policy and identifying the flows, matching that policy. And this could also be the case where if you've implemented a stage deny as part of your policy development process, and you may be interested in identifying the flows matching the stage deny so that you can improve or remediate it in the policies that you are developing. Okay, so there's some few examples as to why you may want to know about flows matching a particular policy. Now, previously we've looked at examples in which we identified flows being either allowed or denied from the perspective of a workload. Okay, so Calico has observability tools such as the service graph, the flow visualization, in which you can either look at flows from the perspective of a workload, or you could look at individual flows and look at the policies that were evaluated as part of either permitting or denying those flows. This example is a bit different. In this example, I'm trying to identify the flows being denied by a particular policy, because a given policy could be denying several flows, okay, or even allowing several flows, right? So just like identifying denied flows, you could use the same queries that we will look at shortly to identify flows being allowed by the policy as well. Okay. All right, so let me navigate to the Kibana flow log dashboard, and if I go back to my Calico cloud instance, let me log into my Calico cloud instance here and go to the policies board. Let's just give this a minute to load. All right, so in the policies board, if I look at my policies board, let me zoom this in a bit. I have several policies here which are currently denying traffic. So for example, I have the tenant1 restrict and tenant2 restrict policies in the security tier, as well as policies in my policy examples tier, as well as a policy in the default tier that's currently denying traffic. Okay. Now in the dashboard, I could say action equals deny to retrieve a summarized view or table of all traffic that is currently being denied in my cluster. Okay, and this is the summary, and we see we have traffic from the monitoring namespace, the app1 namespace, some traffic from a rogue workload currently being denied. Okay, so I'm able to retrieve the traffic that's being denied. If I look at the individual flow logs for a particular flow, so let me say flow logs from the monitoring workload. If I go further down and expand on my logs, it's going to tell me the policy that is denying this flow. Okay, so from the perspective of a workload, or rather from the perspective of a given flow, I'm able to identify the policy that is denying that flow. But let's say I want to identify all the flows being denied by the tenant one restrict policy. So for that, I have a query that I've run before. Okay, and basically in this query, what I'm saying is in the policies array that we have in the flow logs, I'm looking for anything that is reporting a deny and that is also reporting the tenant 10 restrict policy. Okay, I'll have this policy in the description of this video if you want to copy it from there. But this is how you do it. So we have the deny keyword, and we're looking for anything being denied by the tenant one restrict policy. Now I can run this query, and then I have flows that are being denied by this specific policy. And as I look at this policy, and you can see that we don't have anything reported or any source namespace reported. And what that tells me is that anything that's being denied by this policy is destination traffic, as in traffic coming inbound to workloads scoped as part of this policy. And I can further identify that by looking at the flow logs. And as I look at the flow logs, I can see that the reporter was the destination in all these cases. Okay, and also indicated by the destination namespaces. So I have in this case the monitoring workload over here sending traffic to the Hipster Shop and Yao Bank namespaces that are currently being denied by that policy. Now if I go to my tenant one restrict policy, you can see that this policy applies to the Hipster Shop and Yao Bank namespaces. These are my tenant one namespaces. And of course, in this policy, I have certain pass and deny rules. And as of now, if you look at my ingress rules, I'm not passing any traffic from the monitoring namespace for evaluation in subsequent tiers. I'm only passing traffic from the ingress namespace, okay, and traffic from other tenant one namespaces, okay, but I'm not passing traffic from the monitoring namespace. As a result, this flow is being denied, as indicated by the bytes matching the deny rule over here as well, okay. All right, I can do the same thing. If I look at my policies board, I see that I have certain flows matching the tenant 2 restrict policy as well. So I can come back to the dashboard. I could say tenant 2 and get a list of flows being denied by this particular policy. And if I go to my tenant 2 restrict policy, this policy is scoped for workloads in the book info namespace. And it's the same case, right? I'm not permitting inbound traffic from the monitoring namespace. Similar to the previous case, I'm only permitting inbound from the ingress and from within the same namespace. Okay. If you want to know more about how these policies are authored, feel free to check out our other training series or documentation regarding how the policies are authored in Calico. All right, let's take another example here. So in all these cases, what we noticed was that the policy, or rather the flow, was denied at the destination. Okay, so let me take another example here. So let's look at the deny list policy. Okay, and this policy basically denies traffic from certain IP addresses that are classified as embargo countries. Just an example. So I could take this deny list policy, I could take the name of the policy and put it into my query here. That's then going to show me flows being denied in the outbound direction. And the way I know that this is outbound is if I look at my pie chart, I have nothing reported in the destination, nothing reported in the destination namespaces widget here. But I have flows reported in the source namespace. And the source namespace appears to be the policy example app2 namespace in this case. And if I go further down, the reporter in my case is the source. So it appears that I have a rogue workload trying to send traffic to some of these IP addresses that are denied, and those flows are being reported by the source. Okay. So for every flow that we looked at, as you run these queries, the dashboard and the widgets in the dashboard reflect what's in the query. So if you're seeing widgets that are empty, what that means is there's no information to be presented in those widgets. But for example, if I look at the summary widget here, I can see a summary of the flows being denied by that particular policy. I can look at things like the destination port, the IP address to which traffic is being sent, and the source IP that was initiating this flow from within my cluster. Okay. All right. So within the Tigera Manager UI or the Calico UI here, we of course have things like the service graph that reports on flows, and it helps me identify, like I said before, flows that are being denied and the policies in this case that are denying these flows. As I look at this, I can, for example, click on the same flow we looked at previously and identify that it was denied by this ingress policy. And I could even use the flow visualization to, for example, look at namespaces and look at the type of flows being denied. I could click on a particular flow, and then that's going to give me, just give me one sec here. And then that's going to give me the policy, denying a given flow. Okay. But all of this is either from the perspective of a workload or a given flow. But this, what we just looked at, helps you look at flows from, let's say, the perspective of a policy. Okay. And hopefully that is helpful in your troubleshooting scenarios. All right, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.